is dismissing China's spy flight. Yesterday, he called it silly. He's blaming the spy flight for derailing communications between the United States and Beijing. Watch this incredible moment.
How will you manage the diplomatic, relationship with China?
You're right. We should have an open hotline. This silly balloon that was carrying 2 freight cars worth of spying equipment was flying over the United States, and it got shot down, and everything changed in terms of talking to one another. I think you're going to see that begin to thaw very shortly.
Let's be clear, it did not get shot down for 7 days. The president allowed that surveillance balloon to capture information, images, and send the information from above our military installations back to Beijing in real time. In response, China's foreign ministry is urging the United States to meet it halfway and bring bilateral relations back on track. Joining me right now is the Gatestone Institute senior fellow and author of The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War, Gordon Chang, back with us. Gordon, great to see you. What did you make of the president's assessment of the surveillance balloon, calling it silly?
We got to be gravely concerned. We got to remember that surveillance balloon showed China's utter disrespect for the United States. But also, it was surveilling our nuclear weapons sites, which means that China is planning either a first or second nuke strike on the United States. So for Biden to try to say, oh, this is no big deal, just shows you that he is leaving the United States open to China. And that means the worst consequences are on the way. Now, we don't know whether Biden is corrupt or whether he's just misguided. He is leaving us defenseless.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is he corrupt? Is he just another corrupt politician or just misguided? We're trying to understand what's behind these ridiculous comments that a surveillance balloon is silly. But, Gordon, over the weekend, the G7 meeting was more about trying to figure out how these 7 nations are going to push back on the provocations of communist China than anything else. G7 leaders said that there's a need to de-risk but not decouple from China. The nations also claim that they're looking to address challenges posed by Beijing's non-market policies and practices aimed at distorting the global economy, but they said that their policies are not designed to harm China or its economic progress. They're all walking on eggshells around communist China, Gordon.
Well, they certainly are. And they're not willing to say what's necessary, and that is that the United States and the other countries in the G7 need to decouple completely from China. Now, I know that sounds harsh, but the point is that it's necessary. And we know that what times in history when what is necessary is not considered practical are really followed by very horrible periods. And that's what's going on right now. The Biden administration is adopting the same policies with regard to China and Taiwan that it adopted with Ukraine and Russia last year. And we see how that worked out. We don't need war at both ends of the Eurasian landmass because that looks like the beginning of a global conflict.
The other thing is, Gordon, I was just mentioning this to the team here. Remember a couple of weeks ago, the White House basically leaked out that there would be news around the G7 that the president would come up with some kind of a multi-trillion-dollar underwriting, a plan to stop or limit investors in America to invest in Chinese companies, particularly when we're talking about access to technology. We didn't get any of that. Okay, so the White House leaks out this story that the president is going to put limitations on investing in Chinese companies. What do we get? We actually got China hitting back on an American company. Look at how the chip war is heating up. Beijing announcing plans to ban major firms from buying Micron semiconductor chips. So they're icing out Micron technology. China's Cyberspace Administration says it found, quote, significant security risks in Micron products, Gordon. Shares of Micron this morning are taking a hit. The stock is down better than 5%. So this is what we got around the G7, Gordon. And yet, just weeks ago, the White House is floating this story around that the president is going to put limitations in investing in Chinese companies.
Yes. Really what's going on here is that China cut off communication lines with the United States. It's now dangling the prospect of talking to China as if that is a privilege for us. And I think that they are doing that in order to prevent the issuance of those regulations and that executive order, which would cut off American investment into China's AI and other critical sectors. You know, right now we have American companies that are fueling their Chinese counterparts, and those Chinese counterparts are helping the Chinese military develop weapons that are going to be used against the United States. And we learned again that American companies can invest through the thrift savings plan of the federal government into companies that have been put on the entity list of the Commerce Department. This is insane, Maria.
Yeah, and you know, Michael McCaul joined me yesterday, the chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and he mentioned the fact that, don't forget, China came up with all of these new national security laws, and those national security laws make it fine for the CCP to march into any American company that they want if that company is operating in China. They did it to Bain Capital, the consulting company. They're trying to scare consulting companies that are foreigners in China, and they're allowed to do it. They're going into American companies, raiding the companies, stealing their intellectual property. How do American companies operate in China knowing that they face this risk? McCaul went through the foreign policy under President Biden and said he's made one mistake after the another, beginning with when he walked into the Oval Office and canceled the China initiative. Then he waived the sanctions on the Putin pipeline into Europe. That was the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. He waives those sanctions. He has this botched Afghanistan withdrawal. And then right after the botched Afghanistan withdrawal, McCaul said that he saw imagery that showed Russia started getting in place around Ukraine. So the point is all of these missteps from Joe Biden has invited aggression on the world stage.
Yes, and we see the collapse of America standing around the world, whether we're talking about Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, Sudan in North Africa, Brazil and Latin America. You know, in my lifetime, we've never seen such a failure of American policy in such a short period of time, which recalls Robert Gates's famous comment in his 2014 memoir that Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy and national security decision of the past 4 decades. But we also have to ask, Maria, because of that laptop, has China corrupted and bribed the President of the United States?